Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Crone, who's the Chief HR Officer at Paycor. Karen, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Chris. I'm doing great today. It's a great Monday.
Fantastic. Well, you definitely won the award for the best background so far. Keep it up with me. For everyone listening who is on the audio right now, Karen's got a lovely background, made a lot of effort for the show, so really appreciate it. So those who's watching the video will be spoiled.
I appreciate that, Chris. As I shared with you, we've been lucky in that we spend a lot of time on communication, and so we did create our own little studio that has a couple little vignettes, and it does make a much better experience for employees. We can shake it up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, before we jump in, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Yeah, so I always say I'm the accidental tourist to HR. I actually grew up with computers, computer science, networking. I started my early career really in project management around HR systems. At the time, it was PeopleSoft. In the kind of late 90s, there was an economic downturn. I looked around and I thought, well, what function is in every single industry, every single organization, and is often the last one to turn the lights out, when you see an economic downturn? And I thought, HR. And so I actually committed myself to that path, moving from traditional project management of HR systems into recruiting. And so I really feel like recruiting is the fundamental building block of being a successful HR leader, because no matter what role you take, whether you're an operations manager, an executive, or anything in between, you are always in the business of assessing talent. And so it gives you a really good fundamental. I worked at Convergys for many years in a call center operations type role for HR. Really strong foundation in recruiting. Moved to a company called Kendall, where I became my first time head of HR role. I was a global opportunity, and it was really about scaling and growing. And what I learned at that point was that I really love the outsourcing business. I love the business where you have a lot of clients and you're delivering consultative and services and experiences to them. From there, I actually joined Paycor in 2010. We had about 400 employees and are now over 2,000. We're over 300 million in revenue. We were probably about 60 million at that time. So a real growth curve. And again, and somewhat of an outsourcing relationship in that we are providing HCM services to small and mid-sized companies. So we're providing their payroll, time, HR software and running that, helping them run that and providing all the expertise around it to keep them compliant and to help them think about how they get an edge in their business to allow them to focus on the things that they're really good at. So we try and make a difference for those business leaders. So my journey is really very much from the beginning of technology. My first job was about running a computer network that had 6 computers on it, a diskless workstation that had 35 megabytes, which is probably what we have in a greeting card today, and on my way to HR. And I love it. I think it's the backbone of any organization is culture, and it's their people. And there's no one function that touches as many things in the business as the HR function.
Amazing. Just out of curiosity, personally, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced during that transition?
I would say it's always having the confidence to challenge the status quo. I think a lot of times as business leaders and as HR professionals, we see things that we know aren't quite right in business and organization design, in the productivity of the business, in talent, the people who are in certain roles, in our growth models. And you just have to have the confidence to really bring that business perspective to the leadership team and not play a part in the movie, right? It's easy to play the people part and just absorb all the people responsibilities. But the job is much bigger than that and much more influential than that. And I think, it took me time to figure out my job is to challenge that status quo, to make the enterprise more effective, more productive. And, that takes guts. It takes failing. It takes, building your voice, and it takes really developing your business acumen. And I think that was probably the biggest lesson learned in my journey, was that, you got to have the confidence to challenge the status quo, because that's what makes organizations get better.
Yeah. Well, what would you say was the biggest contribution in terms of building your confidence then? Because I think everyone listening definitely agrees with you, but it's easier said than done, as we know. as well. What was it, do you feel, that, got you from?
Part of it is really just getting deep in the business. If you know the business and you're developing your business acumen and you can speak in the language of the business, you're communicating on the same plane as your peer group. So that's one thing. The second is really immersing yourself in the business. You can't figure out the business from behind a desk, right? You have to get out there and be in the mix of it with people, with the business, with the geographies, side by side immersion opportunities. Like, you really have to dig in. And then the third part, Chris, is about developing the relationships. You can't challenge the status quo if you're coming at your peer group in an aggressive way where they think that you're picking on them, right? Mm-hmm. And I think developing those relationships is really important. You have to put the time in to allow them to see that you're a trusted partner, that you have points of view that are grounded in data and reality, and that you have the best interest of the business at heart, not necessarily your own personal agenda. Mm-hmm. And, that just takes practice. And all you really need is one or two advocates who help you deliver the message that allow your voice to get bigger and more resonant.
Those three areas that you mentioned, did you learn from failure? or did you have a great mentor when it came to this, just out of curiosity?
Chris, a little bit of both. I mean, I am not a shrinking violet by nature. I'm a little bit of a bulldog or a little bit of a bull in the china shop. And you have to learn, right? You have to learn over time that you get more done through people and with people than you do in a competitive environment. And so I think I had to learn the hard way many times that it's about enrollment and enlisting people and developing followership. I think you get that over the chronology of your career as you turn from more being interested in your own personal contributions to those that are about empowering other people. So certainly, learning the hard way, right? About why aren't my ideas being recepted? Why aren't I being heard? They're hearing, they're just choosing to ignore, right? And the second is mentorship. I mean, I think if you don't have a couple of people in your corner who are always kind of coaching you and helping you polish the edges or see yourself in the ways that other people see you, you're doing yourself a disservice. I really like right now to cultivate young professionals as mentors, because I think they open my eyes to the way that work gets done. And they open my eyes to the expectations that they have about how work should feel today. And it's different than how I grew up. And so I really enjoy having young professionals as mentors, kind of that reverse mentoring concept, because I do think they help you tune communication. They help you prioritize about what the expectation of the worker is today. And while I've had many, mentors in my career, I think today the young professionals are the most meaningful for me.
That's a fantastic point, and I think everyone can definitely learn from doing that. The amount I'm even learning from my young nieces and nephews is amazing.
It takes vulnerability, and you really have to listen. Like you have to listen and be receptive. I was just talking to someone yesterday, and she said, I think you're one of the few people that doesn't grouse about the millennials. And I'm like, why would I? I mean, they're the ones shaping our future. We have to embrace the ideas they have. And, at Paycor, we really believe in cultivating grassroots contributions and grassroots voices. And you have to be open to that. There's a message in there and a kernel in there that makes your business better.
Well, talking about the shift in the future, I know something you're very passionate about and we wanted to talk about in today's show is the shift of the HR organization to a learning organization, which is a big talking point at the moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts and perspectives on this, and then obviously jump into it in a bit more detail.
Yeah, Chris, I've given this a lot of thought, and I really believe that that the future of HR is not in the traditional employee relations and compensation and benefits and compliance. It's really in people and productivity and in cultivating a learning organization. And the thing that sparked me on this was I read a book a while ago, and I never remember who to attribute this to, but they basically said that the half-life of a skill today is 5 years. And so everything that we learned 10 years ago is obsolete, and everything we learned 5 years ago is half irrelevant. And so I think about just the pace of business, and I have to believe that that window has even shortened. It wouldn't surprise me if today the half-life of a skill is 8 years or 4 years, not 5. And it really made me think about what is the biggest contribution HR can make. And I believe that it's going to be in the concept of retooling your employees to be able to embrace things like machine learning and automated intelligence. We talk about it all the time, right? AI and machine learning. But how it shows up in the business is really going to affect people. And we really need to be in a position to help them embrace those changes, to retool their skill set. It might be that we're turning everyone into a coder, a developer, an engineer. And so I think the HR of the future is going to be very much focused on learning and orienting the business to be able to consume these technologies in a way that gives them an edge. And so while employee relations and comp and benefits are always going to have a role, they're not going to be the lead role anymore. And so the HR professional is going to have to trade more on org design, org development, change leadership, and less so on kind of general traditional practices of HR.
I was thinking about this since our last conversation, and I was wondering, where do you start? Do you start with your own team first and define a new purpose for your HR team itself and reskill HR?
Yeah, I mean, that's
going ahead with that, because that's kind of how I was thinking about it. And if so, have you done this? I just got to throw it out there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we have taken steps. So I would say 2 years ago, we made the decision to take the learning organization for Paycor and blend it with HR. And so in doing that, we brought closer together kind of the traditional training, the onboarding, the manager and leadership development, and we put the voices together so that HR was really helping learning understand the talent, and learning was helping HR understand, what was really happening in the classroom in developmental ways. And I think sometimes we don't bring the learning voice into our talent discussion. They know how people are showing up in the classroom, who's uptaking content, who's really stepping up and taking a leadership role, but we sometimes miss that voice. So we put the two things together. We also spun up a change organization within learning. And so that change organization is leading us into our highest level enterprise changes. So for example, if we launch a new product, it affects sales, it affects service, it affects their client. And so that group of people is really on the point of tying all that stuff together so that it's distributed across the organization. And kind of as a complement to how these two things are working, the business just really tapped the team to spin up our enterprise project management office. So you wouldn't traditionally find your enterprise project management office in the HR and learning function, but it's a reflection that we know change is as much about culture and the change curve itself and change adoption as it really is the exact thing that you're trying to do. So we prioritize culture and change over project management. And so now you're seeing the HR and learning team really be on the point of enterprise change. And so we're practicing a little bit of what we preach. And it's again reinforcing to me that those skill sets of org design, org development, culture, change are really the things that move the needle for the business for HR.
Were there any challenges that you faced or pushback in doing so and bringing those three functions together?
I think in the early days, it was about HR and learning figuring out their role together and the overlap, right? Because HR was kind of like the bully or the big kid, and learning was kind of tagging behind. But I think that today, what we've learned is that if we go into a business relationship with the top recruiter, the top learning person, and the top HR business partner, that is a pretty compelling story for that business leader, right? To have those three messages woven together, to have those three parties understand what's happening in the business, it makes for a more compelling solution for the business. And so that was the early days. I think the next kind of challenge we faced was just sheer prioritization, right? You have so many things in the business that are coming at you that are change related. How do you make sure that you're picking the things that are really going to be most meaningful? And then third, as we're spinning up the enterprise project management office, it's about helping people who are in traditional project management roles understand the importance of the culture piece and the change piece, and why we're leading with that card over the traditional project management. And
Yeah.
so that's a little bit about our journey right now. And we're right in the throes of it, Chris.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And one of the questions I keep getting asked a lot now, which is coming out, is how do you identify what skills you'll need for the future? And I'm just wondering how you guys approach in this new dynamic that you've created. How is that improved? That is it? Are you new on this journey? Because many organizations, I think I'm sure would agree with you, but they're still having that challenge of how do we actually identify what skills we're going to need in the future?
I think one of the things I'm really proud of with my team is that they do immerse themselves in the market and the industry, and they spend time and we make time to really make sure that we're benchmarking against other organizations, that we're taking in all kinds of readings and learnings and belonging to associations. And I think for us, a couple of the things that we've done is we have participated in some assessments of an HR organization or of a learning organization that give us some outside intelligence about where we are in the maturity curve for certain facets of the business, of the function. We do roundtable sessions where we will talk specifically about the talent that we have and what we need. So a couple years ago, for example, we knew that we needed to really improve our game in two ways. One was that we needed a framework for organizational design. So we sent now, I think it will be by the end of October, 5 people through a program at Cornell to teach about org design and workforce planning. Because I'm a believer that if you have a framework and something repeatable, you can build on it and you have a place to start. We did the same thing with coaching skills. We sent our business partners and some of our learning people through a coaching framework to give them an executive coaching kind of grounding. We're doing that same thing right now with change practices and some kind of like process improvement, Six Sigma type, lean type practices. It's called Collaborate Up. And so we sit down every year and identify 2 or 3 things that we want to add to our toolkit as we're on this transition from a traditional HR function to one that's really, challenging the status quo and leading through the learning function.
What about outside of the team to the wider business in terms of the skills you're going to need moving forward, especially as a company in the technology space? I'm sure very competitive.
So one of the things that we do as part of our strategic planning is we really spend time on talent. We'll spend time both in our strategic planning cycle to talk about the talent that we need for the future, to assess what we have. And then we actually commit twice a year, anywhere from 4 to 8 hours twice a year, to just really go through our succession plans and to identify the 2 or 3 things that we want to embed in the business. And so coming out of last year, we decided there were 3 things we wanted to do. One was to drive accountability. And I don't mean that in the punitive sense. I mean it in the ownership sense. We wanted people to feel ownership for, their responsibilities. Sure. And we drove that really through communication because we felt like people take accountability when they understand the direction of the business and what the priorities are. The second thing we wanted to do was drive innovation. And so we have really stimulated things like disrupt and hackathons in the business. We've also incorporated new practices. So we've sent some people through Collaborate Up certification. We've sent them through some change leadership. And right now we're in the process of fierce communications because we feel like if people can engage on ideas, we'll be able to pull more of them from the business. And then the last thing was learning. We wanted to commit that each employee would have 100 hours of learning per year. And that learning could be formal things that we're driving, or it could be informal things. So for example, in the HR and learning organization, we encourage what we call the summertime shakeup. And we allow a certain number of hours outside of the business for them to just focus on whatever topic they want that's of interest that could be applied back to the business. So for example, one of the learning teams explored augmented reality and created a rapid prototype for a building tour of our headquarters. And it's so cool. But it totally came out of just R&D time. They explored a new technology. They explored new ideas and new ways of thinking. And I really think it will be something that we pick up and move forward. So that concept of accountability, innovation, and learning is tied all through that. And that's what the leadership team is trying to drive as new behaviors. And again, trying to certify people in some of these new behaviors as change advocates or, focal points, people who can lead from the front in new ways of doing things.
Oh, that's amazing. As a big geek myself, I was just thinking you should definitely upload that VR tour to LinkedIn or actually YouTube, because you have the 360 capability on YouTube, and you could send that to potential employees
It is
and say,
so
take a
cool.
tour, because they could even take a tour in 360 on their phone.
And the thing is, one of our corporate values, our guiding principles is have fun along the way. And when we moved into our headquarters in 2014, we used to have this myth that we had a pool on the roof, and it was kind of a joke, and, but employees still remember it. And one of their QR codes is the pool, and they have like an augmented picture of the pool on the rooftop. And I just thought, what a testament to our history, right? And our culture. Yeah. And the fact that you have people who were less tenured pulling that concept through, it just was really cool. I mean, it was very inspiring, and it was so professionally done. When you think about a rapid prototype today, you can create a near finished product. And I think that's what's important for HR and learning is we don't have to be perfect. It's better to take a page from Agile and our brothers and sisters in engineering and product management. Yeah. Just get stuff out there and try it. Yeah. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Just out of curiosity, going back to the upskilling point you mentioned, do you have any ways that you guys recognize and reward people for their upskilling efforts?
Gosh, I wish I could say that we were better about that. I think, Chris, that's one of the places that we are focused on for out of our engagement survey. We do a lot of things to recognize people. I will say that we do a lot to bring the spotlight to people. For example, we have a monthly meeting we call the Pulse, which is a live webcast where we cover business milestones, important happenings in the business, and we try and allow employees to really be the featured speakers. So, they get a chance to be behind the camera and feel the nerves of doing that. But I would say that, today's generation wants more, right? They want more feedback, and feedback in some ways comes through recognition. And so we actually have a small group, a focus group working on our practices, because we know we're not as sharp as we could be. And I don't think we know if in this upskilling concept, it doesn't mean spiffs or spot awards or title changes or certificates or, what will it lead to? It'll probably be some blend of that, but I can see it on the horizon, because that's how, people feel like they're progressing.
Exactly. I only asked that because I feel like a lot of companies that I'm speaking to are missing a trick there where, how do you engage employees in upskilling? And I feel, and you are right. I think people are motivated in different ways by different things. So it will depend. But based on your experience, what way of upskilling is being the most valuable to you guys? Is it, partnering with third parties? Is it investing in mobile learning? Is it mentoring, lunch and learns? For you, where's the biggest sort of ROI?
Yeah, I think that what we have found is that it really requires a blended approach. And so I'm going to put the spotlight on one of our programs. We have sales managers who manage sellers in the field. And so a sales manager might have, 5 to 10 people on their team, quota carrying people. And so we really, when we hire these people, they come from all different kinds of backgrounds, right? Some might come from industry, some might not. Some might be earlier careers, some might be tenured. And we really were running into a challenge of how do we onboard these people in a way that's really attuned to where they are? How do you meet them where they are? And so we worked with a third party. It's called Tier 1 Performance Solutions. They're fantastic. They work with a lot of, big organizations, and we're fortunate to work with them. And they helped us come up with a program that is designed around 13 challenges. And so as an incoming manager, you get assessed on these 13 challenges to determine where are you. So maybe you need all 13, maybe you need 3 of 13, maybe you need them in a certain order, but it's designed with a ton of flexibility to be able to meet the person where they are, to meet them where we are seasonally. So there are certain things that we do at the kickoff of our fiscal year versus the midterm. And we paired that with 2 other things. One-to-one coaching. So we have an outside coaching party that is really meeting with them one-to-one about their own development and interests. And then we have coaching circles where we're bringing the groups of people together where you have the tenured and the less experienced, or the industry and the non-industry. And they're sharing their kind of common plot in life, right? And so I think, Chris, that's a really good example of it's independently driven. because the person's picking and choosing the things that are important to them.
Yep.
It's got some self-awareness elements to it because you're getting this outside coach, and it's got the peer and the mentoring because you've got these coaching circles. And I think, it's a really good example of programming that in the past might have looked very different if HR and learning hadn't been together in the concept. It's really benefiting because we're seeing an uptick in our seller performance, but we're also seeing an uptick in the confidence that these people have in their roles, right? They're complex roles, and we've really tried to chunk it up for them in a way that's easier to manage, easier to consume as you're getting started, and at the same time feels personal because you're not attending something that you've done 1,000 times. Yeah. It also allows us to introduce some important practices. So, one of the challenges is hiring. One of the 13 challenges is hiring. And so we have a certain way of interviewing and assessing people, and we have an end of process called the summit. And that's really culturally important to us. And so we put everyone through that. We ground everyone in that. So it's another way for us to reinforce something cultural and that gets people to connect and stick to Paycor in a different way.
Yeah. How have you found personally navigating the technology landscape? Because it's a bit of a mind, it's a bit of a nightmare at the moment. There's a new LMS popping up every day. There's a new solutions. You're a company also in that landscape as well.
Yeah.
Right? It's so tough for CHROs that I speak to. There's a new shiny object coming across their desk every single day, claiming to solve all of their problems. How have you approached that yourself?
Well, it's a little different for me, Chris, because we use Paycor's products, and we feel like that's important because we want our clients to know that we drink our own champagne and that we have familiarity with them, and it allows us to demonstrate for them a way to how we put the technology in practice. So we spend a lot of time with our product management function, leaning into the roadmap. Our voice carries no extra weight. The clients come first, but we often test and prototype and participate in new technology pieces. So for example, we are in the process of developing our compensation module for that small to mid-market to allow them to manage their merit increases, their bonus, increases, so they're not doing it on a spreadsheet. And while, I have 2,000 people and I have an equity program and it's a little more complex, we find a way to make our tools work and find a way to lean in to allow the experience that we have to rub off for the client base. And so, we're working more on point solutions that fill in where Paycor might not have solutions. But our number one principle is that we think it's important to use our own tools. And so any of that noise around technology, I send right to the product management team and we work it together. Over the last several years, we've implemented an LMS, we've implemented a benefits management.
Which one do you use, by the way? Which one do you use, the LMS?
We use Litmos. Yeah.
Oh, Litmos. Okay, cool.
Swift for benefits. So, we're a beneficiary of all of the advances that our clients get. And I'll be honest, there are places where my team wishes we had a little more technology, especially on the higher end talent management practices. But, we figure it out. There are still ways to have great conversations about your talent without having success factors. The conversation is the most meaningful element. It's not the tool. And so you got to get good at the conversation before the tool can enable what you're doing anyway.
Based on what we discussed, where do you see the HR function sort of 5 years from now as we move more towards a learning organization?
I actually think that, the CHRO title might go away. I think you could find that title gets replaced by like Chief Productivity and People Officer, enhancing the notion that the function is really about helping the business perform at a higher level and also taking care of the people matters, right? Those things are never going to go away, and they're actually going to become more important, where we really are driving ourselves to more persona-based solutions. In order to be able to tap into people's individual interests and individual, needs. And so I think that title will prove to be a dated title here pretty soon. And I also think that you'll see a blurring of the lines between what has traditionally been distinct functions, whether that's HR and learning, or you'll see the spin up of change practices finding their way into the HR and learning function. So I think that's where it's headed, Chris. And, it doesn't mean that the traditional compliance pieces aren't important. You absolutely have to have that foundation. I always say that that the compliance functions are like utilities, right? When we come into a room and we turn on the lights, we expect the lights to go on. Well, the same thing. I mean, the business expects that you maintain your compliance, that you're paying people right. Those are jacks to open. And everything else builds on top of it. So if you don't have the utility functions right, or you don't have the opportunity to talk about higher order things. And so I think having companies like Paycor or similar providers take care of those foundational things for you allows you to elevate into the real enterprise change, the meatier topics. And so that's how I think it will evolve. I think in the next 5 years, there will also be a lot of pressure, continued pressure on workplace flexibility. And the notion of, do people really have to come into an office? Can they work from anywhere? Does it really matter? And I think there's a hard place for HR to play about how do you stimulate collaboration and idea generation when people may be sitting, in the four walls of their house. Now they're doing that today, but I think that we could see that pendulum really swing. I think HR organizations are going to be on the point of that transition about how work gets done and how we create connectedness and culture when people don't come to a physical space.
Well, I completely agree with you on all those points, and I'm sure everyone else listening is going to agree. And I feel like we're already seeing it, right? We're already seeing many companies now change the chief HR officer role to chief learning officer or chief people officer. And the HR itself, the sort of word human resources is going away slowly, but surely to match the new needs of the business and the way HR is operating traditionally is kind of been replaced and automated in many cases through technology, which is great because, as you mentioned, then you can focus on more strategic tasks and more people-focused tasks, which is where you can deliver the most value.
Yeah, I mean, if your conversations with your business peers are about compliance-oriented things, that is yawner for them, right? Like they don't even want to talk about that. But you have to find a way to be credible to talk about culture and change and org design, and you have to have the tools. Right. I mean, for many years, we developed the tools to be fantastic at compliance and at payroll and, all of the things that were those foundational. But it is about investing in yourself and retooling. Just like you asked earlier, Chris, we've been very intentional about retooling ourselves. Even our business partners who trade on the concept of relationships need better frameworks to be able to do that because the tasks or the responsibilities they're finding themselves in are much weightier and much more demanding than in the past. It's not just about the workforce plan, like do we have enough people and enough leaders? It's really how am I going to get incremental improvement out of this business, or how am I going to disrupt it? And you want to be part of those conversations. And one way you can be a part is by bringing the framework to the discussion. We have to be on the learning journey ahead of the curve, outpacing the rest of the business.
Yeah. Well, that's really one thing I took away from this conversation, which I love. The fact that you are disrupting, Karen, you're disrupting your team and making sure you have to go through that change journey first as a HR team and department and before you can support the business as well, which was great to hear that you're investing in your team and yourself to achieve that, which is then going to benefit the business because then you can then support them in a better way.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, I really feel like the successor to my role is going to come out of a learning OD culture change capacity. I don't know who it is, but I believe they're going to...
Are you leaving already, Karen?
Yeah, I believe they're going to have those skill sets and we should be cultivating them because that's the legacy we can leave behind is to really set the business up to have someone that's challenging the status quo, that's bringing the voices together, and that takes an intentional change. And we're on that journey here. And I believe maybe my own title will change in the next couple of years, and I'll get with the program.
What do you think, Chief People Officer?
I like the notion of productivity in there.
I noticed you said that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the maybe Chief Productivity and People Officer.
Yeah, you can still be CPO, right? Chief Productivity Officer.
Right. It's a little scary for people to talk about productivity, but it's a fact of life, right? Businesses exist because they get better. And, we want to get better as individuals. And so that P word can be scary, but I think it highlights what's important.
Before we wrap up, Karen, we're going to jump into what we call a quick fire round.
Sure.
Right? I'm going to throw you off guard right now. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. And you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back when becoming a successful HR leader?
Just my own confidence. I mean, believing in myself. That's it. And, I think we all have it in us. We just have to tap into it.
Fantastic. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
It's the people, stupid.
I'm not going to ask where that came from.
In the end, it's all about people. You have to tune in to people and really be interested in them and their motivations and being able to encourage their voice. And when you get behind people, they get behind you.
Fantastic. What's one book you'd recommend that's had the most sort of impact on you throughout your career?
Recently it's been The Advantage, which is a Lencioni book, and it really helped Paycor with its governance. So it helped us have better conversations and to use our time in wise ways. We've also been working with John Doerr's Measure What Matters, and we started OKRs in the fall. And so we're kind of fumbling around with it, but those are two things that are really helping us have better conversations and more prioritization of our work.
Could you share some internet resources that you use to keep up to date with current events and improve your own learning personally as a HR leader?
Yeah, I am a Twitter user. So I am a constant Twitter surfer. And I really feel like that takes me and links me to articles and news ideas that I wouldn't have seen. I use the traditional CEB and SHRM and all and Burson, all the usual suspects. But I really find when I look at individuals and follow their Twitter feeds and their Twitter profiles, I always land on an idea or a concept that I would have never been exposed to. And so for me, Chris, it's Twitter.
Fantastic. What's one thing about your business that you're most excited about?
Oh man, that we're growing. We have so much potential, and we've just, we've hit one phase of our growth and we're on to the next. And, and in growth, you have energy and you have opportunity, and, the rising tide lifts all ships. And we're just poised for our next kind of springboard of growth. And that's super exciting to me. There's always much more energy when you're trying to figure out how to grow and how to keep looking forward. And so for me, that's it. It's the best part.
Amazing. I always love when I hear a HR leader say they're excited about growth, because that means you definitely where you are where you belong.
Growth makes the people happier, right? I mean, it creates opportunities. We should all want growth because it creates new opportunities, new jobs. I always say every 12 months, there will be jobs at Paycor that I haven't even conceived yet because of the way our business is growing. And when that happens, I know that our people are well taken care of because they're growing and developing.
Amazing. I never really thought about it that way. That's a very interesting perspective. Well, look, thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time out to join us. It's been a real pleasure. I know everyone's listening. I'm sure they've got a lot of practical advice, and definitely very thought-provoking for everyone to walk away with a lot of things to digest as well. Before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice you could give to other HR leaders out there that are on their journey to becoming a CHRO, what would that be?
Yeah, I think my one piece of advice is you have to be intentional, because nothing happens by accident. You can't change your function. You can't change the way that you show up unless you're intentional about where you want to go and what you want to be. And I think you can never shortchange putting time into thinking about it. So if you don't have time on your calendar every week, every month to think about your evolution, you're falling behind. And so put that time, invest in yourself, put that time on your calendar, and be intentional about the journey you're taking your function on, because that's the only way to outpace the business and to get ahead of where it's going today. So that's my piece, Chris. And
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for your time today. You've been a great host, and I've enjoyed it.
Appreciate it, joining us. And very last question, Karen. If our listeners wish to reach out to you, have any questions, they want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to do so?
Sure. My email is Crone@paycor.com. That's KCRONE @Paycor, PAYCOR.com. And that's the best way. And I'm always game for conversation, and I look forward to it.
And to save you getting too many emails, you're also on LinkedIn too, right?
I am on LinkedIn. Yeah. So my LinkedIn gets inundated. So I'm on.
Oh, really? Okay.
A once a week cleanup campaign.
Really? It's funny how now even our social media is caught up with how busy our email is at the same time.
Oh, it's crazy.
Can't win either way. So,
yes.
No problem. Well, look, thanks again for taking the time out to join us, and I wish you all the best until next week. Okay.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Have a great day.